Welcome back with me, Alex. In this video, I'll be discussing the storyline of the movie, which is titled Normal. It is a drama film released in the United States in 2007. This film is about the lives of some people that changed drastically after a tragic incident in the past. Before moving on to the story, click the subscribe button so you don't miss the latest video update. With me, Alex. Welcome to the Movie X Recaps.
The film begins by showing a mother who is always sad. After her first child died, for days, months and years passed. But he still couldn't accept the departure of his child, the child who died in a car accident. His mother was named as Catherine. Spends most of her time at home. Apart from that, her longing for her child made her often call her husband, suddenly, just to check on the situation, which sometimes made her husband feel uncomfortable. Elsewhere, a man named Walter is seen. He is a lecturer who is teaching in class. When class finished, Walter was met by one of his female students named Siri. She asked Walter to let her enter his class until he graduated. Seeing that Siri was quite busy as a student and also as a lawyer, because Siri's appearance was quite charming, Walter allowed it without having to think twice. Back again to Catherine, who was celebrating a meal with her relatives, even though the atmosphere was very busy. Catherine still couldn't smile. At the event, Catherine continued to look sullen. At the side of the road, there was a young man who had just come out of prison. His name is Jordy, who was caught after being caught stealing a car with his friend when he got out of prison. Jordy was picked up by his father. He named as Carl. Carl said that he and Alice were waiting at home. Jordy was shocked after hearing that name. It turns out that Alice is his new mother. But Jordy openly told his father that he didn't like the presence of his new mother, even though Jordy had never met him at all. This made his father offended, and they ended up arguing before going home. Back again to Walter, who was seen contemplating while looking at a piece of newspaper. And in the newspaper it turned out there was news about a young man who died in a car accident. And the young man, it turned out to be Katrine's son. From the guilty expression that radiated, it seemed that in the past Walter was the person who crashed Catherine's child to death. Meanwhile, Jordy was finally able to experience breakfast together again, where Carl finally wanted to go to work, told Jordy that Jordy had to work even though his father was quite rich. But his father didn't want his child to be too spoiled, especially since Jordy was labeled as an ex-convict, so it would be difficult for him to enter college. So, the only solution is to work. Alice, who turned out to be a sexy stepmother, couldn't do much and just kept quiet, listening to their chat. Carl also said that if Jordy doesn't get a job within a week, he has to leave this house, because Carl doesn't want Jordy dependent on his parents' money. After that, his father left his house to work. Alice approached Jordy and calmed him down by saying that his father really missed him and loved Jordy very much, so Jordy must get a job as soon as possible. However, Jordy, who was offended, immediately denied this sarcastically. What does her stepmother do? Alice answered that yes, only housewives clean the house. Jordy also didn't like his stepmother and emphasized to Alice that she could never be her mother. On the other hand, Walter finally approached his younger brother, Dennis. He seemed to be suffering from quite a serious mental disorder after an incident in the past. And it turns out that Dennis was also with Walter when the accident happened, and he experienced deep trauma after accident. Walter finally took the step of doing counseling there. He admitted that at the time of the incident, he was really drunk and forced himself to drive his car, resulting in a fatal accident. Elsewhere, it finally appears that Jordy has got a job at a pizza shop. Jordy finally did feeling happy because one of the burdens of his life has passed, namely the searching phase work, which is a scary phase for some phase graduates, especially since Jordy is not a fresh graduate. When Jordy was daydreaming alone in his room, he, who was lazing around, decided to do something activities like single people, who are often alone in their room. However, In the middle, this activity apparently made Geordie forget to lock his bedroom door. Alice just walked in and found Geordie's activities. Geordie was very embarrassed. And finally he went to the park to calm down. But not long after that, he was hanging out in the park. Suddenly, he was approached by his old friend named Melissa. The two of them ended up chatting for a very long time, before finally Melissa invited Geordie to join the party this weekend. The next day, while in Geordie's room, his stepmother, Alice, approached him. Alice politely apologized for yesterday's incident and offered to wash Geordie's clothes, as a sign of Alice's forgiveness. However, Geordie, who was annoyed, refused this and told Alice to stop trying to be her mother, because, in reality, they were not mother and daughter. Meanwhile, Walter is seen who has just finished teaching at his campus. But because it was quite complicated with his luggage, Siri finally helped him. Initially, this makes them both awkward and nervous because they both happen to have the same needs. And Walter, who hasn't sweated in a long time, aka exercised. And you already understand what happened next.
You like that, Professor?
Happened next. On the other hand, Caterin's sadness is increasingly visible. When he left and was on the street, he thought of every young man with a slightly bald head as his son. This is quite heartbreaking, considering that Caterin still can't do it. Forget the child. The next day, Geordie, who had just returned home, accidentally saw Alice changing clothes. At first Geordie was stunned like an idiot. Alice, who is still a believer, thinks that all this is over. That's right. He decided to leave there. However, strangely, in the middle of his steps, his faith was shaken, which made him immediately stop his steps. And in the midst of this awkwardness, it was as if these two people were following instincts whispered by the devil, and think about the risks he will bear. Finally, Geordie had the courage to approach Alice. And you already know that if the atmosphere is tense like this, which way the ending will go. But in the middle of the incident, the sound of their father's car was heard. Suddenly they both panicked. Geordie had no other choice. He finally hid in the toilet, in order to divert her husband's attention. Alice is forced to prevent Carl from becoming suspicious. She seduced her husband, and it ended with the action that the audience expected. In the midst of this action, his father was not focused on his surroundings, so Geordie finally managed to escape and protect himself from his father's wrath. After that incident, Geordie and Alice's relationship became very intimate in their daily lives. Geordie, the pious and kind-hearted child, has replaced the role of his father. Satsang Dad is busy with his office matters. Time passed, and Geordie, who was at work, was met by Melissa there. Melissa asked why Geordie didn't join at the party last weekend, but Geordie casually answered that he was busy at that time. Finally, Melissa understood that Geordie also had other activities, and Melissa's feelings rise to make Geordie her lover. Melissa started her steps by inviting Geordie to come home with her tonight. After the two of them returned home, Melissa was invited to stop by to chat while drinking coffee in her room. But apparently Geordie's coffee ran out, and in the end the two of them ended up alone, just chat in the room. Who were carried away by the atmosphere, seemed to receive evil whispers from the devil, but unfortunately, because Mama Alice noticed that there was a girl's car outside, feeling jealous, she stopped the two of them. In the end, Lisa became uncomfortable being there. He immediately left Geordie just like that. Melissa's presence also made Alice's mother feel jealous, where Alice is seen several times seeking attention from Geordie, while occasionally insinuating that Geordie prefers children, who are still fresh compared to her, But Jordy responded very calmly, because he was bored with his life, which was becoming more and more wrong day by day, and he preferred Melissa. Meanwhile, Jordy also had the courage to call Catherine and apologize for her child's death, where Jordy is very deterred and feel guilty. Not only that, Jordy and Catherine decided to meet at the beach. There Jordy cried while tell the true chronology of the incident. Jordy thought that the accident would not have happened if he had not stolen his neighbor's car, but Catherine doesn't blame Jordy for what happened, because Catherine felt more annoyed with the person who hit them, because Walter was known to be driving drunk at that time. After that meeting, Catherine also decided to recognize her child. But fortunately, the decision, it's bad to burn things that can be prevented. Not long after the fire starts to light up, her husband came and immediately stopped her. The two people had an argument, and luckily the fire was extinguished. Elsewhere, Jordy, who had just returned home, was shocked to see Alice, who was battered. And it turns out that Alice's mother told her husband about her affair with Jordy. This also made her husband very angry, and that's not enough, that's all. Carl was very disappointed by his son's barbaric actions. That was until finally Carl's emotions reached their peak and Jordy was thrown out of his house. He left from there with battered condition. But in the end, Jordy can live a happy life with Melissa. In another place, Denise finally found out that the accident was not her fault. Finally she was able to recover, where it looks like he can finally get out of his room and go straight on a date with a girl he met on a matchmaking application. While his older brother Walter is now haunted by guilt. He also went to Catherine's house to apologize, but Catherine refused his apology. The film ends with Walter seen go into a pizza restaurant while accepting the bitter reality of life for him. Well, that was the storyline of the film entitled Normal, where the story of the three main characters gives an implicit message that life always has its ups and downs, where when Catherine was able to accept the death of her child, now Walter is haunted by sadness and guilt. It's also called life, bro. Thank you for watching this video. If you have a film request, please write it in the comments column below and don't forget to press the like, share, and subscribe buttons.